here at Linaro Connect in Redwood City, California, and I'm here with Kiko, Christian Reis, for those who don't know your full name, and you're the VP of Engineering for Linaro.
That's right.
I'm also here with Alexander Sack, and Alexander, you're the Technical Director at Linaro as well. So earlier this week, Kiko, you talked about unorthodox engineering, and I think Alexander was your example of that style of engineering. Can you two talk a little bit about what that is and what that means within the context of Linaro?
Working in open source is kind of weird. These, companies that we're working with are used to a more embedded model where you do control all the software stack which is going on top of whatever hardware they're shipping. But I think we're working in a world which is very different, in which a lot of what you're shipping is basically being produced by people out there working in different companies, your competitors, and so in order to cope with that, I think you can't use the same strategies that you use in a regular development environment.
So Alexander, what does that mean to you?
It means for me that you always have to look how can you basically follow the very fast model of open source, and how can you bring the pieces together that are coming out of all the individual engineers that are in Linaro, but also outside of Linaro, and ensure that everybody can keep pace with how the open source community moves forward. And it's like, we come from an open source background, but when we meet Linaro, we see that things even have to move faster in order to stay on top of what's going on, to ensure that the output of all the engineering really works nicely together, and that's basically what we do.
So as we look at what's been accomplished here at this Connect and how we got here, how do you think we got to the point we are, that we evolved over the last year and a half to where we are, and what can people see going into the next quarter as we ramp up for Hong Kong in May? How do you think, one, we got there, and two, where are we going?
So in the beginning, when we had Connect and we were basically running Linaro, there was a lot of uncertainty about what things we were actually going to get done. So we had this idea about improving enablement, and we had this great help from grants around device tree, this idea about using device tree on ARM, and we really used that as like sort of a flag that we carried. And sure, enablement and the challenges on enablement go beyond just using device tree, but it's been like a really important part of what we did. And in the beginning, those discussions were really tough, because you had these members coming together. They weren't sure about whether that was actually going to be the thing that they should use, and none of the things that we were proposing were yet accepted into the main line. And so we were, it was touch and go at that point there. And we've been really lucky to see that the members have wanted to work together. So they've, while it could have been a situation where all these guys came together and they're saying, I work for TI, you work for ST Ericsson, I can't tell you anything. They came with this honest, open attitude of actually wanting to solve the common problems that they had. And over time, at least that's what I see this week here, that we've evolved to a point where the conversations are really good now. People are really comfortable with one another, that team there has been working together. And you get new people coming in, but I think the feeling of the team has been preserved, that you have these people coming in and they realize that it's an open, frank conversation, that they talk about their difficulties in their platforms. In the beginning, they're very cagey. They don't want to talk about what's missing on the platform or what doesn't work, but as time goes on, you see that they're much more open. And so I see the meetings now as being super productive. You go in there, and it's like really everybody's open about talking what they're doing, and they reach an action plan. People are willing to trade off. So I think that's something which we've really evolved towards.
I think one thing we really had learned in the past is that even though you have a long-term vision and you know where you want to be, you don't know how you will get there. And thinking like what will happen in the next 6 months and so on, and trying to understand that you want to achieve this small step in 6 months is not going to work. So we really are set up to ensure that we can really get things done in the short term and basically be flexible to change our course whenever things happen, because we are working for 2 years or almost 2 years now in Linaro, and whenever I thought, okay, this is basically how we will get there, it turned out to be completely different.
Yeah.
And sometimes we also realize actually we don't want to be there. So and this would be a much better place to be. So we have transitioned this organization into something where we are fully set up to ensure to allow us to actually move in directions and don't feel like we lose anything. And everybody has to learn that this is part of the game, that you have to change course every time you see new information coming in, and this is part of it. I mean, these connects you sit together with people in a room, you get all those ideas, and you knew the solution up front, and then suddenly you see things much clearer. But then you go home and you start working on it, and even in a month, you find out that there's even a much better way you can do it. And if you manage to keep an organization like Linaro super flexible and everybody understands that that's the case, then you can really find the most efficient way to a point where you want to be eventually. The biggest problem there, however, is that you really have to remember the focus and what you originally wanted to do. So you are doing always those steps and so on, and then you sometimes have to really go back and think, is this still going in the right direction? And this is what here happens at this Connect again. It's kind of, every time you go to Connect, you do like kind of this reset. You go on basically and say like, are we still on track what we have done in the last 3 months? Because you did all those small steps and they're all cool and everybody understands they give value, but then you think like, is this really how we can invest the value at best? So you try to forge the whole organization together, to come together and find a common goal again that they can understand and that is also in reach, but far enough so that people know that they have to work hard and move forward.
So one of the things you said to me in one of our hallway tracks this week was that you viewed your job as a bridging a gap. Were there any new gaps identified at this Connect? And as engineering, I would ask you both that question because you look at it from different levels, from different views. Were there gaps that you didn't know existed before? And have you formulated a plan to join, to hop over those gaps or join those gaps?
Okay, so I think that there's, to me at least, okay, you can tell me afterwards if you think this is right or not. So I think that there is this fundamental gap that Alexander's team has to span, and that is, so in Linaro we're set up to do things, at least in engineering, in two different areas. One area which is very upstream focused, and it's focused around upstream technology and infrastructure, so that's the working groups, and that's what I oversee directly. Alexander handles the platform, and the platform team is basically looking at what work's happening here and what work's happening in open source in general, in the member companies, upstream, and basically pulling that together into an integrated system or multiple integrated systems. We do an Android and an Ubuntu-based build, for instance. So there's always going to be an inherent tension between those two things. So there's going to be, so for me, there's this fundamental gap that will always exist between these two, because whenever you're doing integration, you're worried about bringing those things together and then trying to actually use the output of it. Where people that are focused on technology, their concerns are more around long-term maintainability, the quality and completeness of the actual feature they're developing. And so these guys here aren't really worried about the big picture. They're worried about solving one specific problem really well. And that's essential work. We do it in a bunch of different areas. But if you don't see how the thing is coming together in this unified platform that Alexander's team works on, then how do you know if it worked or not? How do you know if you're making it better or worse? So one good example is performance benchmarks. You have, 70 guys in working groups doing work in different places. You do one test in platform, which can tell you, are we actually making things faster or slower for this specific scenario? And I don't think there's any way of actually addressing that gap there. So it's something which it will require always energy for you to bridge.
Yeah.
How did I do?
Yeah, quite good. So maybe just take a step back, what platform is really doing. And I kind of stand of platform as like the engine of the whole organization. So we don't necessarily run our own agenda unless we get the feeling we need to do something. So we spin a constant release cycle. We basically validate the output. We provide test cases and feedback into the individual unit. This is basically what we see when we try to bring your stuff together. And I think this turned out to be very effective, this approach, saying what we had initially said, we don't just focus on the individual topics like kernel and graphics and so on, but we always challenge it. How does it make a difference if you put that into software stacks that are close to what you find in the product afterwards? So whatever you do doesn't matter if it doesn't improve the product that you want to improve, if it doesn't make it easier to bring those to market ultimately. And this turned out to be a very good story, and it's getting more and more used and also better understood. There's also this, if you asked about what gaps did I newly identified, and the good thing about platform is you're in the middle of it, so you basically see everybody wants to achieve this and that, and they want to integrate their stable kernel branch here, and they want to do this into their platform because they think that's the right thing to do, and you notice there's lots of duplication ongoing, and we basically lose this kind of everybody works on the same thing and focuses on, and we see that every day, because when people want to do that, it spreads us thin, it causes us duplication of effort because we have different kernel versions to validate, we have different builds to make, so we can actually ensure that everybody has the stuff they want. But I can only say, look, this is everything, this is what happens in the organization, and I see there's duplication ongoing, and that's what we shouldn't do anymore, and then people have to either follow or not. We are there basically to serve them. And the big thing that becomes clearer here is really to say we shouldn't really, as Linaro itself, try to understand the mission to bring ARM faster to market by saying we go and improve a kernel that was released and that is done, and then massage it until it's almost product ready and so on. There are other people doing it, and they have the business around that, but nobody really takes care about what happens before Linus releases this kernel release. So we want to continuously really work on that, and we want to facilitate that and try to bring the latest tip kernel basically into the platform, see what happens, then get everybody help on fixing that, because the ultimate goal is that whatever Linus releases is then as stable as we know for x86 and as good or even more. So that's basically the big gap we have found here. On a more social level, I also found out the way, because where we do things, we basically do things, everybody asks us, can you do this for me, can you integrate that, can you help me write this test case and so on. It's really that that we in platform, we are in the open, and the engineering there is special in the sense that this is a place where all the people come together to collaborate, and they are competitors or they're colleagues or they have different interests and so on. So it needs to be very, very clear if you want to make this successful. What are the rules of engagement here? What do you have to do in order to participate, and what do you have to do in order to continue being used there? But there also need to be rules that if you basically do other stuff, then you cannot participate in that anymore. And everybody has to understand that this is a fair thing, and there are the given rules, and nobody feels that basically one competitor is better off than the others. And the only place where you can do that is in the open, in my opinion, and that's where the platform comes together, because it's a natural place where everybody starts collaborating on things.
I know a year and a half ago, when Linaro was announced at one of the UDSs, there was a lot of excitement and buzz around that announcement, and then following Linaro over these last 18 months or so, there is a huge buzz now. Like every day when you search the web, there is something mentioned about Linaro somewhere. That's not surprising to me, considering all the things that come out of these special engineering groups. What is one thing, there's many I'm sure you can talk about.
Between us?
One thing.
I'll do happy
what one thing that you noticed this time that really, like, you caught a glimpse of it and you went, that's exciting. I can't wait to see when that happens. Do you have that one thing that you can identify?
You go first. Think about it.
So,
one thing.
Yeah, let me try to think. It's so many stuff is going on, and it's often hard to pick one of those things and say that's really the most exciting thing to go on. But I think it's actually not the technical achievement that is really the most important thing for me. For me, it's really about how well this Linaro model turned out to work in general. I mean, there were so many things that we observed like half a year ago already that we thought like that's a problem for us. But then they turned out to be really, really good. Like having all, for instance, we always thought it is really important that our engineers present themselves as Linaro with a big Linaro take on. So Linaro gets a stronger branding and so on and so on. But when I look at it, how we basically do things and how we submit kernel patches and so on, I feel it doesn't really matter, because ultimately the people that want to know, they will know that Linaro is behind it. But if they keep using, for instance, their company badges, it means if they speak with a Linaro voice, then suddenly everybody understands. All those companies, they have aligned and they speak about the same thing. Either they know they are not Linaros and they basically see they all agree, so we have to do it, or they know that's Linaro and they manage to get those guys that are actually competitors to speak with one voice. And that's basically what I see happening. I find it most exciting currently, that we basically have these. And there are many other examples where we thought this is not going to work, but it turned out to be a really, really good thing of a setup. But you don't want to know others, so I will not continue on that.
So Alexander's right that it's really cool to see these guys coming together, and we didn't actually have participation for people that were wider industry outside of the members in the beginning. It was really confined to members, and now you see that the technical teams from the different companies even companies that we hadn't thought of, have come in and provided input. I think that's really accomplishment, a really interesting accomplishment. I don't know. There's a lot of technical stuff that happened that I thought was interesting. I don't think there's something which stands out. Well, in my 3 o'clock plenary, there's something which struck me this week, but it's not a very exciting thing. It's something which actually worries me, which has come out this week, and that I started to realize that the success of Android and the decline of the other mobile platforms that people have worked on in the past is really pointing in a scary direction, a direction in which this thing which I call, the GPL user space or free software user space as we know it is losing out, and I want to talk about that later in the plan. So I'm not gonna blow it here. So that's the one thing which to me I think was the biggest realization.
So as we wrap up this, and you guys are always fun to talk to because
we can keep on talking
because you're always exciting, and you always have exciting ideas. As you mentioned that. You see these companies coming together. That's only one piece of the bigger picture. That's only one part of a larger community that we're going to grow as we go forward. How can, speaking of growing those looking at your piece of the puzzle in engineering, how can those who watch this interview get involved with your engineering teams? Where's the best place they can go, and what resources do they have to get involved with Linaro?
They should go to the board of directors and tell them to sign the contracts, become Linaro
their board
members.
of directors.
That's right. That's the thing which is the most important. Look, this is the place where we're doing all the important work on ARM. All the decisions that are being made on how open source on ARM is going to work is being done here. If you've come here this week, you'll see everybody who has anything to say about open source on ARM is here. So if you're not here, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, the amount of momentum we have created in the past behind ARM and Linux is just incredible. I mean, and I see it. I mean, if you're not here, you are not in. That's the biggest thing that one can realize when you're here, and it's really the case, right? I mean, we are ARM on Linux basically because we define how it has to move on, and so what we propose will be the solution. It might not be in the upstream projects now, but this is going, and there's no way to say what we basically do is not a valid solution for the problem, because who else will do it? And if people say and don't accept that this is happening, then the ARM problems in the Linux kernel will never be solved, because this is the only place where this can be solved, where you can make it happen.
So for those who want to find out more information about Linaro and this very unique and special organization that we're all involved in, they can go to linaro.org or they can go to wiki.linaro.org. So Kiko, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Sure. Alexander, thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you guys again in Hong Kong.
Right.
Thank you.
Looking forward as well.